Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Toolkit at fantasyfootballtoolkit.com. I am the Lost Cause, coming back off of my hiatus as the CBA gets signed and NFL free agency, well, just blows the crap out of everything else in the water. It was a huge amount of signings, of releases, of dealings, of handshakes, trades, and everything else under the sun. But we need to come back to fantasy football, looking at divisions around the league. And in our next division-by-division analysis, we look at the AFC South. Yes, a division that has mostly been manning-handled by the Colts. And that's where we're going to start off first in Indianapolis. Peyton Manning last season finished with 4,700 yards passing and 33 touchdowns, as well as 17 interceptions. He's their longtime quarterback, longtime contract. He gets big numbers every single year. If this man is not in your top 5, even if you have apprehensions about him because of his age, because of injuries that have happened on the field to people in his backfield, people that are going to be receiving the ball, tight ends, offensive linemen, I wouldn't have any worries at all about putting him in my top 5, even in my top 3 for this upcoming season. One of the players that are going to be very happy with his consistent play at quarterback is, of course, Austin Collie. Now, everybody talks about Reggie Wayne. Reggie Wayne had 1,355 yards receiving last year and 6 touchdowns, but look at Austin Collie. In the first half of the season, he was absolutely el fuego. And he looks to get even better this season and get to that top wide receiver level that he played at the beginning of last season. Injury bug kind of started plaguing him. In 7 games missed, he still had 649 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns. That is really good compared to a full season played by Pierre Garçon at 680 plus yards and 6 touchdowns. So keep Austin Collie on your radar. Any number 1, number 2 wide receivers in Indianapolis deserve heavy looks up until about the 6th or 7th round. And then you can start looking at wide receivers that are, deeper and deeper and deeper. Reggie Wayne is in a lot of people's top 10 this year. I think Austin Collie is going to be a sleeper, people. If you can pick him up before round 7, I think that he could be a viable number 2 receiver. If you look in some of the games that he played in last season, week 1 at Houston, 11 receptions for 163 yards, 1 touchdown. Week 3 at Denver blew up, 12 receptions, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns. In week 15, where they were hosting Jacksonville, 8 receptions, 87 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, like I said, keep him on the radar. Running backs were a major health problem. Joseph Adai comes back to the Colts. A lot of people thought that he was going to see his last game as a Colt at the end of the last year's season, but he comes back. He missed half the season, 495 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns. Now, he's going to be splitting carries with Donald Brown, but one of the players that you need to look at the running game for the Colts, and you might want to draft him late round, is Delone Carter. He's a 5'9", 220-pound running back out of Syracuse. He might get the carries, especially if the injury bug starts playing the running backs like he did last season. He's got real good ball security. He's got sure hands. And the thing is that's the kind of running back Peyton Manning likes. In Jacksonville, Blaine Gabbert ended up getting drafted in the 1st round. Jacksonville ended up reaching for him, going after him. It was a need. David Garrard, 2,700 plus yards, 23 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Doesn't look like a bad touchdown-interception ratio, but you still need to get the job done, and you need to get the yardage. You need to get the first downs as a quarterback. And eventually, Blaine, he's going to eventually become that top quarterback in Jacksonville. Now, that isn't to say that you should draft him. I would stay away from him personally, at least this season. If you are in a dynasty league, you probably want to pick him up sometime around round 2, maybe a little bit earlier, depending on the size of your league. Mike Sims-Walker's gone. However, the rest of the receiving core should give them a really good look after round 6, round 7. Mike Thomas, 66 receptions, 820 yards in the air, 4 touchdowns. Mercedes Lewis, 58 receptions, 700 yards, 10 touchdowns. There was also another wide receiver, and this is the sleeper. This is the late rounder. This is, if you're in a dynasty league, this is probably the pickup. He's 6 foot, 205 pounds. He's out of Mount Union, a small school. He's a dynamic pickup, and he could really blow up the passing game for Jacksonville, and eventually he's going to help Gabbert transition to the NFL a little bit more efficiently. MJD in the air, of course, 34 receptions, 300 yards, and then on the ground, Maurice Jones-Drew is a stud, 1,300 yards and 5 touchdowns. Now let's take a look at the Houston Texans, and probably one of the most underrated, most walked over quarterbacks whenever there's a fantasy football discussion about quarterbacks is in Houston. Matt Schaub, 4,300 plus yards passing last season. A craptastic touchdown-interception ratio, but still, 24 touchdowns. I like the guy. People call him inconsistent. People call him trash. People call him a lot of things. But ground-out yardage is still yardage. The one problem that he needs to do is definitely switch the touchdown-interception ratio. A little bit more touchdowns, a little bit less interceptions, and I think that you're going to see him break the top 5 in quarterbacks every single season around this roster. Arian Foster, 1,616 yards on the ground, 16 touchdowns, big stud. Look for some of those rushing numbers to go down. I don't know about the receiving numbers, though. 66 receptions, 604 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the air. I think you're going to still see that. That's the dump-off for Schaub. That's what he's comfortable with. Throw deep to Johnson, dump off to Foster. I think those numbers are going to be there. So if you play in a points per reception league, Arian Foster is the #1 player in the NFL for fantasy football in that style of a fantasy league. Andre Johnson, 86 receptions, 1,200 plus yards, and 8 touchdowns. Now, getting away from the offense, most of the draft for Houston centered around filling defensive needs, both the starters as well as the depth in the secondary. I still wouldn't draft them right now, but if they start to generate some heavy points, if they're holding teams down and they're able to put together some sacks and some interceptions consistently, you might want to keep an eye on them. All right, let's look at the Tennessee Titans. In with the old, not with the new is kind of the mentality that they're having in Tennessee right at this point. Vince Young is gone. Head case. Bad head case. A lot of people say that Philadelphia was brilliant for picking him up. I'm not too sure about that. Matt Hasselbeck, however, comes in to help kickstart the team into a contender over the next 2 years. I'm not too sure about that either, but Hasselbeck is a veteran back there. A lot of people had problems with him in Seattle in his last couple seasons. I really don't. I see this as a real nice transition into a team that needs him. A team that's not really bickering and there's no dissension for an incoming quarterback. They're looking for somebody to keep quiet, to help lead the offense, and at the same time to not be that head case that a couple other players, not saying anything, about any names, I don't know, at random, Moss and Young, I don't know. But yeah, so he should be a stable influence on that offense. Chris Johnson, another stable influence on the offense year in and year out. 1,300 yards on the ground, 11 touchdowns, and in the air, 44 receptions for 200 plus and 1 touchdown. He's going to be a nice help for Hasselbeck. He's going to be dependent on him. Now, looking at the receivers, there's some stuff to look at here. Kenny Britt, if he comes back from the injury and he comes back healthy, Kenny Britt is a decent pickup in the mid-rounds for a #2 wide receiver or a #3 wide receiver. I mean, hell, if you pick up somebody better that's your #2 and if you get him as your #3, you're looking at a solid receiving corps. Nate Washington, also another solid receiver. Kenny Britt's stats last season, 42 receptions, 775 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Nate Washington, same 42 receptions, 687 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Now they also had a signing in Tennessee. Daniel Graham comes in, helps become a stable influence off the line, short passing game, nice tight end for Hasselbeck. Jake Locker was drafted in the first round to become the quarterback of the future for Tennessee. Hopefully he's not a head case. 6'3", 231 quarterback out of Washington. Now, there's a lot of reports in college, accuracy problems, consistency problems, but his leadership, his work ethic, and other intangibles outweigh those accuracy issues. And that's what Tennessee needs. It doesn't have to be the perfect quarterback, but what it does have to be is a stable influence on the offense to turn that offense around. You do have weapons, You do have weapons on the ground, in the air. You have them short yardage and long. Now you just need somebody to lead that arsenal, that entourage that you have. And I think that was a solid pickup by Tennessee to grab him. That's our look at the AFC South for the Fantasy Football Toolkit. You can check out this podcast as well as every other podcast at fantasyfootballtoolkit.blogspot.com. You can also sign up for our YouTube channel to get notifications of exactly when we put up a new one. You can also check us out on Twitter. If you have any questions, any comments, any photos, any rumors, any videos, hell, if you have an 8-bit video game that you'd like to showcase exclusively to me, you can email me at the link on the right. This is The Lost Cause saying later.